Okay, so welcome back to all of you guys. I'm going to continue sharing teachings of the Buddha to help you guys understand this path more. This next topic of the Five Precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. This is 5 impactful decisions that you can make wisely or unwisely that are going to lead to either wholesome results or unwholesome results for you. Sometimes people think that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. This isn't actually true. The Buddha never actually taught that way. Whenever you see things like that, you know that the Buddha didn't teach it because he didn't teach rules and commandments. He didn't teach things that are black and white. So I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha to be able to help you see what he actually taught on this important topic. And as we do, just like always, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. So remember, here you guys can use the microphones, and then online you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So first, in order to understand what I'm going to be sharing with you with the 5 precepts, it's important to understand that what the Buddha is sharing with you is this natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, or action and result. Everything he taught in one way or another is coming back to this. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, we're talking about cultivating wisdom of the natural laws. This is one of the main natural laws that the Buddha taught to help you be able to see this cause and effect, or this action and result, that there are certain decisions that we make that lead to certain results. And when we understand that natural law, then we can navigate the world more peacefully. Also, what he's teaching you in the 5 precepts is he's teaching you how to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. There's a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in each one of the decisions if you didn't make them based on the 5 precepts. So I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha, helping you guys to see what he taught, and then I'm going to apply it to day-to-day life so that you can see how to apply it. Remember, the Buddha is not trying to convince you to do anything. He's not trying to force you to do anything. You are an adult. You get to make all the decisions in your life for yourself. What the role of a Buddhist teacher is to help you understand the natural law of Kamma. And as you guys ask questions, then we can help you to see it more and more clearly. But we're not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in life. So when I share this with you, I'm going to be teaching you this natural law, but I'm not trying to convince you to do anything specific, because it's your life to decide what you would like to do. I'm just helping you to see the natural law, and then you make whatever decisions that you'd like for yourself. So again, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions as we go. So the Buddha is teaching you this cause and effect, or this action and result, the results of your decisions. It's your life, your decisions, and your results. So I'll show you how this works. So here's the first precept. He says, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So oftentimes people say this says no killing. That's not what the Buddha is saying here. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. But whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, if there's something that you don't understand or something you don't know, you need to understand it. You need to investigate it and figure it out. So when you see something like this, one of the things that you can see that he's teaching you is to have compassion for the welfare of all living beings. Well, don't just assume that you know what a living being is. You need to actually be able to know what is a living being and what isn't a living being. So the Buddha gave a teaching on this to be able to help you understand what is a living being. It's something called the 5 aggregates, or we might think of it as the 5 criteria, or the 5 collections, or the 5 elements. These are the 5 things that determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. And this definition is held up for 2,500 years. So I'm going to teach it to you. And then as I'm teaching it, don't believe it. You know that you're a living being, so you can take what it is that I'm sharing with you, and you can independently verify that this is true. So the Buddha shares that each living being is going to have 5 things. They're going to have physical form, right? You have physical form, you have physical structures. They're going to have feelings. You know, you have feelings, pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. A living being is going to have perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world. Then the living being is going to have volitional formations. What that is choices and decisions, that a living being is going to be able to make their own choices and decisions. And then the 5th thing is that they have a consciousness, or a mind. right? So you know that you are a living being. You have physical form, you have feelings, you have perceptions, you have views and opinions about the world, you have volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and you have a consciousness, which is a mind. So does a rabbit, so does a squirrel, so does a bird, a dog. All these things are living beings. So you can compare this teaching of the five aggregates, and you can see all these beings have all five things. But don't just stop there. When you're independently verifying the teachings of the Buddha, you need to be able to look at other things that you know aren't living beings and see if that holds up too. So for example, take this chair that I'm sitting in. Does this chair have physical form? Yeah, it has physical form, right? Does it have feelings? Right? Doesn't have feelings, right? Does it have views and opinions about the world? Does it think like, wow, this guy sitting on me is awfully heavy. I'd rather him not sit on me, right? They don't have views and opinions, right? This chair doesn't have a view or opinion about the world. It doesn't have a perception. Does it have choices and decisions? Can it choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and put itself back down? It can't do that. And does it have a consciousness or a mind? Doesn't have that, right? So you can see this definition holds up. Okay, so a living being is going to have the five aggregates: form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and it's going to have a consciousness. So that's what you would ultimately like to be able to learn. But while you're on your way to learning that, here's kind of like a little shorthand way to think about it, but it doesn't apply in all situations. That's why it's not the natural laws. The Buddha taught the natural law. So a living being is generally going to come from an egg, a sperm, and there's going to be a consciousness. This isn't true in all situations. There are some living beings that don't come from an egg and a sperm. So that's why you need to know the five aggregates. But this applies to about 99.9% of all living beings. And when you understand what is a living being, then you start to understand that the language that we use to describe things oftentimes is not true reality. We might say things like, don't kill that tree, or I'm going to kill this virus, or I'm going to kill this bacteria that's in the body. Well, you can see through the five aggregates that these aren't living beings, but we use language in a way that doesn't represent true reality. So we're not really killing a tree because it's not a living being. What we're doing is we're harvesting it. This tree is providing a certain resource that we need in order to live our life. We're not really killing that broccoli. When we pick the broccoli, we're actually harvesting it, right? But we say the word killing, and this is leading people to misunderstand what is a living being and what isn't a living being. You can see these kinds of things through the five aggregates, but you can also see it through the natural law of Kamma. The way the natural law of Kamma works is that whenever you're putting out harm and you cause harm to a living being, harm is going to come back to you. Causing a living being harm is to cause harm to their physical body, to their material possessions, or their reputation. Whenever you cause harm to a living being, they're going to want to cause you harm back. Remember, you can't cause other people to be angry or frustrated. Even if people are blaming you for their anger and frustration, you can't cause them to be angry and frustrated. Just like you cause your own anger and frustration, other people are causing their own anger and frustration too. So you can't cause someone to be discontent, but you can cause them harm, causing harm to their physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation. And whenever you're putting out harm, harm will come back to you. So this bacteria that's in your body, if it was a living being and you killed it, you would experience unwholesome results or unwholesome Kamma. But you are actually experiencing wholesome Kamma. When you eliminate the bacteria from your body, you're experiencing health. Right? So you can see that we use words that don't actually represent true reality. We will say, oh, let me take that antibiotic so I can kill this bacteria in the body. You're not actually killing the bacteria. You're eliminating it out of the body. And now you're not causing harm to any being. That's why you're experiencing wholesome results. You're actually living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because the first being you need to live compassionately for is yourself. If you don't have compassion for yourself, you can't have compassion for others. What compassion is the concern for the misfortune of all living beings. That's what compassion is, that you have concern for their misfortune. One side of this would be indifference, where you could care less about what happens to other beings. It's like, oh, so what? It's not my friend. It's not my family. I don't care. That would be indifference. That's not where you're interested in living. On the other side of that would be worry and anxiety. Like, oh my gosh, those kids don't have food. Like, what am I going to do? Like, oh my gosh, they don't have food. I'm so worried. I have so much anxiety. I'm so stressed to see those kids not have food. That's the opposite side. Those are two opposite sides. The Buddha is teaching you to come into the middle, where you have compassion, where you have concern for the misfortune of others. Whether you choose to do something about it or not, that's a whole separate question. But you need to maintain the compassion in your mind, that you have concern for the misfortune of others. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do here is have compassion for all living beings, right? So now what I'm going to do is talk about some things that are intentional killings, and I'm going to give you some examples of how these things could potentially be helpful, but how these things could potentially be harmful, because all of these are intentional killings. Euthanasia of a human or animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killings, murder. These are all intentional killings. But whether you choose to do these things or not is a choice for you to make. It's not up to me to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, right? You are an adult. You make your own decisions. It's always your life and your decisions. But I'm going to show you in situations where this could potentially be helpful or it could be harmful. I'm going to share like this one, termination of a pregnancy. Okay. Now, sometimes people think of this as a political discussion, but this isn't a political discussion to me, because it's a medical technology that we have available to us. And in some situations, it could be helpful. In some situations, it could be harmful. If somebody came to me and asked me for advice of whether they should get a termination of a pregnancy or an abortion or not, I actually wouldn't tell them. I wouldn't say yes or no, because it's not my decision. It's not my place to tell somebody else what they should do or they shouldn't do with their body. Instead, what I would do is I would say, well, if you get an abortion or termination of your pregnancy, you're going to experience this. And if you don't get one, then this is what you're going to experience. And then it's up for that person to decide for themselves what they should or shouldn't do. So let's just take this one so you can see how it can potentially be beneficial in some situations, and in some situations it could potentially be harmful. But again, it's up to that person to decide for themselves. So obviously I don't have a womb, but let's just say I was a female and I have a womb and there's a baby inside the womb. And through medical technology, let's just say the doctor says to me, hey, look, if you allow this fetus to continue to grow in your womb, it's threatening your life. This fetus will never live a viable life outside the womb. And if you continue to allow this fetus to grow inside your womb, it's actually threatening your own life and you could die. In fact, we recommend an emergency surgery to be able to remove that out of your body. Well, if I chose to terminate this pregnancy, I am living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because the first living being you need to live compassionately for is this one, right? So in this situation, it could potentially be helpful, and someone might choose to do that. And that might be like kind of a once in a lifetime kind of thing, maybe twice in a lifetime kind of thing. It's a pretty rare thing that those things happen, but it does happen. And that's one of the reasons why this medical technology is actually helpful. It's beneficial to be able to have that in the world. But then there could be other situations where, let's just say I was regularly having sex with lots of people and I was regularly getting pregnant. And let's just say I've had 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 different abortions or termination of pregnancies. Now in this situation, I'm using it for birth control. And now each time I'm killing a living being in doing this. And now it's going to start putting difficulties and health issues on the body. Because if you have this procedure multiple times like that, it actually starts affecting your own health. So in this situation, I'm now experiencing unwholesome kamma or unwholesome results because of my decisions and what I'm choosing to do. But again, what someone chooses to do is a choice for them to make. It's not up to me to tell people what they should or shouldn't be doing. So you can see here where it could potentially be helpful or it could be harmful. Let's take a real world situation from my life, actually. Let's just say you have termites that are infecting your home. We actually had termites one time at our house. My wife came to me and she's like, David, we have termites. I was like, what? Like, how do you know? Like, I've never even seen a termite. Like, where's the termites? And she took me over to where they were and she showed me and she was like, here, we have termites. And I was like, oh, I think we should probably figure this out. We need to take care of this. So I started doing some research online to see if there was a way to get rid of these termites without actually killing them. And then when I was researching, I realized like, no, there's no way to get rid of termites without killing them. So I recommended to my wife that she call somebody to come take care of it. And that's what she did. She called someone and they came and put things around the house. And over a period of 2 years, it ended up taking care of this. And the termites no longer infested the home. Well, if we would have let those termites continue to eat our home, that wouldn't have been living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because we can't just donate our house for food for termites, right? That's the challenge of being in the animal world, is that animals don't have the level of consciousness as a human being, whereas if we ate wood as part of our food that we needed, we would go out into the forest and we would eat wood that doesn't bother anybody, that doesn't cause harm. But these animals, unfortunately, don't have that level of consciousness. And because they were causing harm, now harm came to them. That is the natural law of Kamma, that if you cause harm, harm is now going to come to you. So we lived compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, but unfortunately, there was no way to eliminate them without actually killing them. So that's what needed to ended up happening, and that's what happened. So you're going to need to look at each situation that you have and realize that what the Buddha is not teaching you here is he's not teaching you to preserve all life at all cost. Sometimes that's what people read when they read things like this. You're not interested in interpreting the teachings of the Buddha. You're interested in seeing what it is that he's teaching you to be able to see this middle way. What he's teaching you to do is eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. Because if you go out into the world actively looking to murder another being, you have craving and you have anger, you have ill will, and it's coming from your ignorance. But if you're not doing that, then you're not actually having craving, anger, and ignorance. You're actually residing with generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. This is your compassion that you're having as a result. So you would like to get to the point where you're not operating through craving, anger, and ignorance, but instead you're practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So we can use some of these others and look at these as well. Like a war. A government could tell us, go over there and kill those people. Right? If you go kill those people on the land, we're okay with that. We're not going to prosecute you for murder. But if you kill the people here on our land, we're going to prosecute you for murder. This is what a government could do. But the human laws are imperfect. They're not actually going to be perfect because they're administered and created by human beings. So a government could tell someone to go over there and kill those people, and that's what they would like them to do, and they're not going to arrest them for that. But if you come and kill people on our land, we're going to arrest you for that. That's a human law. That's a human decision. But you can't escape the natural law of Kamma. The natural law of Kamma is going to affect you whether you're aware of it or not. So if an individual chose to go off to war and fight and kill, you can't escape the natural law of Kamma. This is why you yourself could easily end up dead or injured. You could have an amputation. You can have a brain injury. You can get addicted to drugs and alcohol. Oftentimes when people come back from wars, they oftentimes are addicted to drugs and alcohol. They sometimes commit suicide. They're sometimes having difficulties reintegrating into society and living in society, securing homes, housing, and employment. This is the natural law of Kamma. It's the results of your decisions. So whether someone chooses to go off to war or not, again, is a choice for them to make. But there is a natural law here that is going to affect you in the choices that you make. And that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see. So you're going to need to look at things like this as they happen in your life and decide what it is that you are going to plan to do in any given situation. And you're always welcome to come ask me for guidance and suggestions. I will never tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I will only help you to see the natural law, and then you make the decisions for yourself. Sometimes students ask me about this. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. It's called a DNR, or a do not resuscitate. This is a legal document that you can put in place now while you're alive that tells people that, hey, if this body dies, don't use medical technology to bring me back to life. Sometimes students ask me, they say, hey, I have this. Am I practicing this precept? And the answer is yes, you're still practicing the precept because you haven't intentionally killed anybody. All you've done is decided that, hey, I'm comfortable with death. If this being dies, just let it die. You don't need to use medical technology to bring me back. So this type of thing, if you end up deciding to have one at some point, you are practicing this precept. And then sometimes people ask me about defense and protection. Like, should you defend yourself if somebody's attacking you? Well, if you have someone breaking into your home at 2 a.m. in the morning and you're in your bedroom sleeping and they're coming in through a window, I guarantee you that they're not there to bring you chocolate and flowers, right? That's not why they're there. They're there to do harm, right? And you need to be able to understand that this person is here to do harm. And if possible, what I suggest people do is to try to get out of the house, right? If they want to break something, if they want to steal something, so be it, right? You go somewhere else, call the police. They're the ones who have the training and the tools and the equipment to be able to handle that kind of thing. And you just live compassionately, keeping this being safe. But this practice and this path and the way the world works is not black and white. The Buddha is not giving you a decision tree that if this happens, do this. And if this happens, do that. That means there would be a permanent answer for every single situation. Because while I share with you that it would be wise to just get out of the house, in every situation, it's not wise to get out of the house. Maybe you hear someone break in through your window and you look outside and there's a gang of people outside. It's unwise to go out, right? So what you need to do is move to this higher consciousness where you can think through the variables of any given situation and decide what's wise. Because not only could there potentially be a gang outside, but maybe the whole neighborhood is on fire. Maybe there's a natural forest fire and it's engulfed the whole neighborhood. And maybe you look outside and there's a fire. It might be unwise to go outside. Who knows? So you're going to need to think through each individual decision. But if this person is coming towards you and you're backed up in the corner, it would not be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings to just stand there and let this person stab you with a knife or hit you with a piece of wood, right? It wouldn't be living compassionately because you need to live compassionately for this being. So if you need to defend yourself, that harm that is coming to that being, that's based on their decisions. It's not based on your decisions. You're not going out into the world looking to harm somebody. You're just hanging out in your house, sleeping, and now harm is coming to you, and this person is experiencing harm because of the harm they're choosing to cause, right? So this doesn't teach to preserve all life at all costs. It's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So what I would encourage you to do is when harm's coming to you like that, is to use the least amount of harm as possible to stop this from happening and continuing to happen. And this is, again, where you can see the natural law of Kamma, that you're experiencing wholesome results, because when somebody's coming at you with harm and now you stop that harm, you're actually experiencing wholesome results. Whereas if you weren't practicing this precept, you would actually experience unwholesome results. So if you need to defend this being who you are, go for it. That's what you should do. But you're only causing the least amount of harm as possible in order to stop this harm coming to you. Then sometimes students ask me about animal products and whether or not they should eat animal products or use animal products. And so I'll share with you that if you move to a plant-based food supply, if you eat vegan food, you'll see that there's actually improvement to the health of the body and the health of the mind. But again, whether you do that or not, it's a choice for you to make. If or when you ever choose to do that, it's a choice for you to make. What you'll notice is that when you're eating animal products, that you're not just eating the flesh of the animal, you're eating whatever else is in there. And nowadays, people put in drugs and hormones and toxins and things like this into the animals because they're trying to grow them very fast to be able to make lots of profit. And when you're eating the animal flesh, you're eating those drugs, hormones, and toxins as well. Even wild animals that are in the wild, they've taken fish out of wild streams that are clean running streams, and they've tested the flesh. They find substances that aren't supposed to be there. They find things like cocaine or antidepressants and things like this. There was like 80 or 90 different substances that were in the flesh of the fish that weren't supposed to be there. So whenever you're eating animal flesh, you're actually eating all those drugs, hormones, and toxins too, and it creates more sickness in the body, and it affects the mind as well. And if you gradually move into a plant-based food supply, you'll see that the health of the body and the health of the mind improves. And what you might come to find out too is that at one time human beings were exclusively plant-based eaters. When we first came into the world, we only ate plants. And this is what scientists and researchers tell us, but you should never believe anybody, not even a scientist or researcher. You need to look for independent verification for yourself. And where you can find this independent verification is with your teeth. That if you look at your teeth are very similar to a cow's teeth or a horse's teeth. They actually eat plants. Our teeth are very similar to their teeth, that we have almost exactly the same type of teeth because we only ever used to eat plants. That if you look at an animal that eats meat, they have really sharp ripping and tearing teeth because they have to bite the animal, they have to bite the flesh and rip it and tear it. Our teeth don't have that. So our teeth have been designed from the very beginning to be plant-based eaters. And we used to eat plants exclusively, but our population became so big that the forest could no longer support our needs and our demands for plants. So we actually turned to meat out of necessity. That we saw animals killing other animals and they were eating animals. So we actually got together and we pushed away the animals and we took over their hunt. We were actually scavengers. After we were plant-based eaters, we then actually moved into being scavengers, where we actually took over other animals' kills. But then that wasn't enough meat for us. So we ended up moving to organized hunting, where we would get together, we would organize, and we would go out into the forest, we would hunt and kill and bring meat back to our caves, right? But then that wasn't enough meat for us. So now we do manufactured farming, where we have people who manufacture animals, and now we eat those, or some people eat those. So this plant-based food will actually help you to experience improved results in your day-to-day life with the health of the body and the health of the mind. But whether you choose to do that or not, it's a choice for you to make. If you ever choose to do that, I would suggest to do it gradually and slowly, where you're not just snapping your fingers and instantly moving to a plant-based food supply, because you need to find new restaurants, new suppliers, new recipes. So you just gradually increase eating plant-based food and gradually decrease eating meat. And you'll see more health and improvement to the body and to the mind. So do you guys have any questions on this precept? No questions? Okay, let me see if we have anything online here. Hello to everyone online. Okay, I don't see any questions here. So let's move to the next precept. Here the Buddha says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. Okay, so he's teaching here to not steal, that it's unwise to steal, because again, it's based in craving, anger, and ignorance. That somebody sees something and they have a craving for it. I want that thing. The mind is longing, yearning for it. And now the individual thinks that I'm going to steal it. This is having ill will or anger towards that person. Because when you steal that thing, you're causing harm to that other person because they've worked really hard to acquire that particular thing. And now if I take it, it's actually causing harm to that person. And this is coming from the mind's ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, not realizing that by me causing harm is actually going to come back to me. Right? So the Buddha teaches you not to steal, that it would be unwise to actually steal. So again, you can't cause someone to be discontent, but you can cause them harm. If you cause harm to their physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation, harm is going to come back to you. So if I stole someone's car, I've caused them harm because now they can't go to work. They can't go to take their kids to school if they have kids. They can't go to the store and buy basic necessities to sustain their life. I've just caused this person harm, right? So now this harm is going to come back to me, right? I'm going to experience some kind of harm. Maybe they come and find me, or I get arrested, or maybe their friends and family find me, or who knows what might happen in this situation. There's any number of things that could happen. It's also important to not assume that something can be used or taken, right? Like just to say I was a college student and I was handing in a paper at school. And let's just say I walked into the classroom and the professor's not there, and I see there's a stapler on their desk and I need to staple my paper, right? And now the professor's out of the room, and I just pick up the stapler and I start stapling the paper. But now the professor walks in. It's like, hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler. Right? So now I've just put myself in this situation. I've made this decision, and now they're angry and frustrated, not realizing that their anger is coming from their own mind. And now with their anger, they're going to attribute that anger to me. They're going to think I'm the one who's causing their anger. And now they might fail me on that paper, or they might even fail me in the entire class. They're so angry, right? So this is a decision that I'm making that's leading to this result. Whereas if I understood this precept, I would know that it'd be wise to wait for the professor to come in and then ask them, would it be possible to use your stapler? And if they say no, then I would just go somewhere else, right? I'll just go ask another professor. I'll just go to the store and ask somebody else. No big deal. But remember, the teachings of the Buddha here aren't black and white, right? It's not always do it this way and never do it that way. That would be black and white. That would be absolutes. There's a gray area here. Let's just say I'm out in my village. And let's just say when I walk outside, I notice one of my neighbors has been working in the yard with some equipment, and they've cut their arm and they're bleeding profusely out of their arm. And they will die at any moment if I continue to allow them to bleed. Well, maybe my other neighbor has a fabric on their front porch, and I would like to just go over and grab the fabric, wrap up a tourniquet, and save their life, right? That's what I would end up doing. I'm not going to go to the neighbor, ding dong, and just kind of wait for them to come. Ding dong, ding dong. Oh, by the way, can I use your fabric? Our neighbor's bleeding out over here. They're probably dead already because I was waiting like 2 minutes before you came downstairs to answer the door. Do you mind if I use this fabric? No, you're not going to do that, right? You just grab the fabric and you go over, you wrap them up with a tourniquet, you get the ambulance there, you send them on the ambulance. And now, because you know this precept, you go to the neighbor, ding dong. Hello, neighbor. So sorry to bother you. I'm so sorry. By the way, you had this fabric on your front porch. We had a neighbor that was bleeding. I used your fabric and I'd like to replace that. Could you tell me where you bought that from so that I can go get one? Or maybe I can just give you the money and reimburse you for this. How would you like to handle this? I'm so sorry that I did this, right? And in this situation, you'll be able to deal with this kind of situation. So you're moving to a higher consciousness where you're looking at the variables that are involved and you're making a decision. And that decision is going to be unique in each situation. So the Buddha's not teaching you always do it this way and never do it this way. There's a gray area that you need to be able to look at. It's not a decision tree, right? But he's teaching you not to have craving, anger, and ignorance. In that situation with the fabric, I'm practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, right? This is why it's going to produce wholesome results. This person got to live. We saved his life because we were practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And now when I go to the neighbor is going to be understanding of that. And now I can resolve it because I know this precept. Okay, another part here is accepting what is given. You can see that here where the Buddha is talking about accepting what is given. What he's talking about here is that if someone's practicing generosity with you, it's generally wise to accept what is given. So when grandma's giving you that sweater at Christmas or whatever your birthday, and you look at that sweater and you're like, I'm never going to wear that sweater. The Buddha is teaching you to accept it. The reason why is because it's helping grandma's mind that she's practicing generosity. She's giving and sharing. If you were to shut down that gift that grandma's giving you, she's not able to practice generosity, right? So it's enhancing the quality of her mind to practice generosity. And if you shut down people's generosity enough, eventually they're going to stop practicing generosity with you. So the Buddha teaches you to accept what is given. Right? So now if you're accepting that sweater and you know you're not going to wear it, you can practice generosity. You can give it to somebody else, right? Sometimes people think that's regifting and you shouldn't do that. Okay, so the other option is to put it in the closet, let it sit there for 20 years and it deteriorates and nobody gets a chance to use it. If grandma gets angry that you've given away the sweater, That's because grandma has craving, desire, attachment. She has expectations. She didn't practice pure generosity. When she gave you the sweater, she had a certain expectation that you would wear that sweater. So if you've given the gift away and she gets angry, you haven't caused that anger. It's grandma's mind that is causing that anger. So maybe you give it to somebody and it goes through 3, 4, 5, 10 different hands. And eventually that 10th person looks at it and they're like, that's the most beautiful sweater I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm going to wear that every single day. Right. And now this person, in the process, there was 10 or 12 different people that practiced generosity. And that's very good for the quality of their mind. Right. But again, it's not black and white. If someone offers you crystal methamphetamine or heroin or cocaine, are you going to accept what is given? Probably not, right? You're going to be like, dude, I'm all right. I'm fine, right? I don't need that, right? So this isn't always do it one way and never do it another way. You need to be able to see the gray area here. And then awaiting what is given. Awaiting what is given is that you don't put expectations on people to get you things. Because if you put expectations on people to give you things, there's going to be situations where you don't get what you want, and now you're going to be angry or frustrated. The Buddha is teaching you how to protect your mind and how to interact with people in a wise way. So if you have a life partner that's going out on a business trip, and you know that they're going somewhere, if you load them up with a bunch of expectations of what you want, now they're looking around that town for all the things that you need. And if they don't bring you back everything you wanted, you'll be angry or frustrated or irritated. So the Buddha is teaching you how to protect your mind here, that you just await what is given. If they would like to get you something on that trip, wonderful. And if not, then that's fine too. And you just protect your mind because you don't have an expectation or a craving that they will get you something. So you just await what is given. But remember, this isn't black and white. Right? I've had students come here before and they say, hey, David, I'm going back to the USA. I'll be there for 6 weeks and then I'm going to come back to Chiang Mai. Is there anything that I can bring you? Right? In this situation, they're practicing generosity and now they're asking, hey, can I bring you something? Right? So you need to be able to see all the variables here, that it's not black and white. So any questions on this one here, number 2? No questions? Okay, so now let's go to the third one. This one's usually translated as no sexual misconduct, but the Buddha's giving you much more detail than that. So here's what the Buddha says. He says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So he's teaching you how to have sexual activity in a way that doesn't cause harm to others. Because again, if you cause harm, harm is going to come back to you. So this one where he's talking about abandoning sexual activity with people who are protected by their family, he's talking about having sex with minors. If we have sex with minors, it's actually going to be damaging to that person and to the family, because the family is trying to teach this individual how to grow and develop. And if at 8 years old, 12 years old, they're having sex, it actually lures them away from that. And now their mind isn't able to develop with their family. So in most places in the world, the legal laws, the government laws, match up with the natural law of Kamma. Most places it's illegal to have sex with a minor, but some places it's not. There's some places in the world where you could legally have sex with an 8-year-old child and you would not get arrested by the government. But there's still the natural law of Kamma that's being affected here and that's at play, because those places that are actually like that, you will see their political system, their educational system, their society is not so well developed. And this is the reason why, is because people are having sex very young in life and the society has not been growing and developing in a way that actually fosters growth economically or politically or otherwise. So the Buddha is teaching us that it's unwise to have sex with minors. Here where the Buddha says whose violation entails a penalty, he's talking about sex without consent. If we were to rape somebody or have sex against their will, it's going to cause that person harm. And now harm's going to come to you. You can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get arrested. These are all things that happen. This is the cause and effect. This is the action and result, the results of our decisions. So that's why the Buddha is teaching that it's unwise there. Are you guys familiar with this term chastity? Are you guys familiar with this term? What chastity is? I'll explain it to you. Okay, I see you shaking your head no. Okay, so in ancient times, there were people who put metal underwear on their daughters, right? And the father would have the lock and the key. And it was only the father that could unlock these metal underwear. That's chastity. I can't imagine walking around with metal underwear, but apparently there was people that do that. You can see pictures on the internet of these chastity belts. They call it chastity belt. That's chastity, where there's nobody having sex with this person. There's metal underwear on this person, right? Unchastity would be just the opposite, where you're having sex with lots and lots and lots and lots of different people. If you're doing that, this is where we end up getting sexually transmitted diseases, right? This is the cause and effect of that. Or people can get very jealous, even when people say that, hey, you can have sex with other people, I don't mind. People can get very jealous in these situations. This is their craving, and you can experience getting beat up. You can get murdered. Your property can be damaged because people get so jealous, they actually destroy your property and things like that. So these are all the results of the decisions that we're making in order to have sex with multiple people. We can even lose our reputation in the community. These are all things that can occur. Sometimes in different cultures, they might actually go to their family and they might say, hey, I've met somebody. I'd like to move in here to your home. We're going to save up money, and then we're going to go get a house on our own. And in this case, the family has accepted their relationship, and they said, yeah, you guys can move in, no problem, right? In those situations, that's not what the Buddha is talking about here, where he says people who are protected by their mother, father, brother, sister, or relatives, because the family has accepted the relationship. So in that situation, you're actually practicing this precept. So cultures like here in Thailand, they do that, where if you're like in your early 20s or even 30s, they will have a partner and they will come to their mom and dad and say, hey, do you guys mind if we move in? We need to like 3 years, 5 years to save up some money, and then we're going to go get our own house. And they're like, yeah, sure, you guys can do that, right? So if you choose to have sex in that situation, you're practicing this precept. Up here where the Buddha says who are protected by teachings, he's talking about people who have decided to become celibate. There are certain people on the path to enlightenment who choose to not have sex any longer. You can actually get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having a sexual relationship. And oftentimes that's what people do when they're young and they're actually practicing these teachings, is they'll make their way up to the second stage of enlightenment. And in that stage of enlightenment, you're still able to have sexual relationships, and you'll be able to have sexual relationships and be just fine. And your life will be pretty peaceful in that second stage of enlightenment. But you're not going to be able to experience complete peace and complete joy in your mind, which is the enlightened mental state, as long as you have a craving for sexual activity. Because in some situations, you'll have sex and you'll feel really good about that. You'll get all these pleasant feelings. But in other situations, you won't be able to have sex and you'll be agitated or frustrated. You might have experienced that, where you had a partner for a few months or a few years, and then you guys broke up and you couldn't have sex for a while, and you're kind of agitated and frustrated because you weren't able to have sex. So it's the same thing, that even when you're in a relationship with someone, there's some times where you're going to have sex and you'll feel great, and other times you won't be able to have sex and you'll be frustrated or annoyed. Or maybe sometimes you'll have sex and it wasn't as pleasing as you thought it was needing to be, and now you're agitated and frustrated even though you had sex. You still can be frustrated, agitated there. So there's certain people that have decided to be celibate, where they're no longer interested in having sex, and they're making their way to the third and the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened. So here in Thailand, they make it really easy for you to be able to identify these types of people. That if you see someone wearing an orange robe and shaving their hair, they are typically celibate. They're not going to be having sex with anybody. Also here in Thailand, if people are wearing white clothes and they're shaving their hair, they're also not having sex with other people. So you would know to have sex with people who are actually interested in having sex. I wear white clothes and I shave my head and I don't actually have sex any longer, but that's not the reason why I wear white clothes and shave my hair. Like, I don't need to advertise to people that I'm not having sex, right? But just so you guys know that people who shave their hair and wear white clothes or orange clothes, they're not having sex with others. Because one of the best things that could actually happen for an individual is that they actually get to enlightenment. That's the very best thing that could ever happen for you in your entire life, where your mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So if you tried to lure this person away from that celibacy, you're actually causing harm to that person. And that person, if they get to enlightenment, it's actually helping not only them, but it's helping lots of people around them, because now they can gain the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment, all these other people. So the Buddha teaches you not to try to lure people away from their vow of celibacy. Then up here where it talks about abandoning unchastity, that's also people who are committed in other relationships. It's also over here where he says who have a husband, wife, or partner, or for someone who's garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So if somebody's either in a relationship or if you're in a relationship, it's unwise to go outside of that relationship and actually have sex, because now people can get jealous, people can get beat up, murdered, your property can be damaged, you can experience sexually transmitted diseases. This is all the results of not understanding this precept and the wisdom. And there's a certain amount of anger, right? There's a craving, anger, and ignorance there, that there's this craving to have sex, having sex with lots of different people. And there's a certain amount of ill will and anger and hostility oftentimes. And then it's coming from the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. There's one here that you guys can't quite see. Unfortunately, it looks like the projector has slid down, and it talks about human trafficking. If you were to have sex with someone who is being human trafficked, that's like someone who's being forced to have sex against their will, and there's typically a payment involved. There's harm in that too, that this person is being forced to have sex against their will. They're being trapped as a prisoner perhaps, and now you're going into that environment to be able to pay to have sex with this person. And now you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can even get robbed in those situations where those kinds of things are happening. There's a big case in the USA right now about this. If you guys are familiar with the news, talking about human trafficking and some people that were experiencing that, and it's all over the news, and people are experiencing all kinds of harms because of this, the victims, but also the people who were participating in that too. So human trafficking would be unwise. That would also be the abandoning of unchastity. Here's some more. Sometimes there's people who are offering paid sexual services. They're actually doing it willingly, that they actually are interested in providing this service. Once again, you're practicing unchastity here. This is why you can get sexually transmitted diseases. You can get beat up, murdered. You can get robbed in these environments. So it's not always wise to go into those kinds of environments. Notice that the Buddha doesn't talk about same-gender relationships here. He was aware of them because he talks about it in his teachings. Oftentimes people think that maybe this is something new that just started. If you understand the universal truth of impermanence, there's been same-gender relationships ever since the beginning of humanity. There's never been a time where all people had sex with the opposite gender. It just doesn't happen. That not every woman is interested in having sex with a man, and that every man is interested in having sex with a woman, right? That is the impermanent nature of the world, that some people have sex with the opposite gender and some people have sex with the same gender. That's a normal thing that happens in society because of the universal truth of impermanence. So the Buddha wisely didn't include it here because he understood that two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex with each other, they're not causing harm to anybody. Whether it's a male and a female, or a male and a male, or a female and a female, they're two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex with each other, and they're not actually causing any harm. So I usually like to point out this is how wise this individual was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this, where today we have people who don't understand this. So if you're someone who has a same-gender relationship, or you know someone who does, you're not causing anybody any harm whatsoever. And you probably already know that. Where when other people are getting angry because someone has a same-gender relationship, that is because of their craving. They're craving everybody to do things a certain way. They're craving permanence. And now when they don't get what they want, their anger arises, and it's coming from the mind's ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So if you're someone who has same-gender relationship, or you know someone who does, you're not causing any harm. You can also understand transgender individuals through the teachings of the Buddha with the universal truth of impermanence and the cycle of rebirth, you can understand that the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different. And the idea of every mind coming into a body and identifying exactly the same way as the sexual organs is impossible because of the universal truth of impermanence. That some people's mind, they come into this body, the mind can identify as female where the body has male sexual organs, or the mind can identify as a male and the body has female sexual organs. This is normal based on the universal truth of impermanence. And if you understand the cycle of rebirth, you can understand it from there too. That if someone's been female, 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 female in multiple existences, and now this mind is in this new body that has male sexual organs, well, it's understandable that the mind still identifies as a female because it's been female for so many existences. And the same thing can happen, male, 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 and the mind can end up in a female body, and now it's identifying as a male, even though the female sexual organs exist in this existence. So transgender individuals, they're not causing any harm. They haven't done anything wrong. It's just that people's minds have a craving for everybody to identify with the same sexual organs as the body. And now they get angry when they see somebody that doesn't have that. But that's just from the mind's ignorance or the unknowing of true reality that the world is full of impermanence. And it's not possible for every body to have a mind that identifies the same way as the sexual organs. It's just physically not possible because of the universal truth of impermanence. Sometimes people ask me about masturbation because they've been taught that it's all wrong. You should never do it. I've heard all kinds of things. People will say all kinds of different things. So I'm going to teach you about this as it relates to these teachings and what it is that is potentially helpful here, but you could also cause harm with this too. So with masturbation, if you actually are using it in a way to decrease your sensual desire, it's actually really helpful. But you can actually use masturbation in a way that increases your sensual desire too. That could be harmful. So for example, if somebody was listening to this talk and they were like, oh my gosh, I have like 10 boyfriends. I have 10 girlfriends. Man, I should really only have one. You know, this is really unwise of me to have so many boyfriends and girlfriends. Maybe I'll bring this down to one person. So now maybe they bring this down to one person, but they have this really high sexual craving in their mind. And maybe they use a little bit of masturbation to help them to be able to get down to the point where they can have a relationship with one person. Well, that was really helpful. Right? Masturbation helped them to get to this point where now they only have one relationship. Or let's just say somebody was interested in going out and raping somebody and having sex against somebody's will, and instead they choose to masturbate. That was actually really helpful because they actually didn't cause harm to this person by going to rape them. And instead they chose to do some masturbation. So this can actually be helpful. But you could also use masturbation in a way that is harmful. Like if you were masturbating 10, 15, 20, 25 times a day, this is actually increasing your sensual desire. And now it can be harmful to your own mind. But masturbation can actually be helpful. It can help release the pressure out of your mind where you have that strong urge to have sex. And now when you're having that strong urge to have sex, you use a little bit of masturbation in order to help calm your mind down. If you guys are familiar with a dam, a multi-million-dollar structure that holds back water, these are multi-million-dollar structures, and they have to protect these dams because they're not permanent. And sometimes what happens is the water builds up on the dam really, really high, and it puts a lot of pressure on the dam. Do you guys know what they do in order to protect the dam? They release it, right? They open up the dam to release the pressure, and then the water drops down, and then they close the dam again. Well, it's the same thing with your mind. If you're moving towards eliminating sexual cravings or you're reducing your sexual cravings, you can sometimes experience the building up of pressure in your mind. And when you're noticing that, sometimes what you need to do is a little bit of masturbation, and that's going to help to release that pressure. And now let's just say you went 1 week without having any kind of sexual activity, and now maybe you masturbate. Okay, that released the pressure out of your mind, and now maybe you go 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right? And then maybe you need a little bit more, and then maybe you go 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks, and then you need a little bit more. So you can ultimately gradually expand the amount of time like this by using just a little bit of masturbation here or there. So this is how it can actually be helpful for you. Sex with animals is one of those few things that actually is black and white. I've never encountered this, but I suspect if somebody chose to do it, they could get injured, they could get diseases and illnesses. An animal can't consent to having sex with us. It's just not possible. It's not possible to be able to do that. So imagine if someone did that, there'd be all kinds of harms that they would experience. There's something on here that you guys can't see here at the temple, but you guys can see online, is pornography. That pornography is something that you would like to move away from because your mind gets addicted to it. And as you get closer and closer into that and deeper into it, it takes your mind into this fantasy world. And even when you try to come out of that, it's really hard to get away from pornography because your mind's holding on to it and craving it. And then even when you start having sex with a human being again, it oftentimes doesn't seem as fulfilling because your mind's gone down into this pornography. So it's best, if you're interested in intimate contact, to go towards having intimate contact with an actual person, and you'll find it to be much more fulfilling and satisfying that way, and you don't allow your mind to get hooked to pornography. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. Anything you guys would like to ask? Yeah, go for it.
Oh, is it on? Yeah, it is. All right. So for level 3 and 4, sex is off the table.
It's because of the mind's central desire. By the time you get to the third stage of enlightenment, you would have eliminated your sensual desire. So it's not a rule, it's not a commandment, it's just the way that the mind develops, that in the second stage of enlightenment, there's still some sensual desire there, but by the third stage of enlightenment, you will have eliminated your sensual desire.
So
and one of the strongest sensual desires people usually have is sexual contact.
So it's the sexual desire part. Because really my question is, if you have two enlightened beings, you're not procreating then, unless it's the sexual desire part. Like if they engage in it solely for the purpose of creating an offspring, is that separate since it's no longer sexual desire, or is it completely impossible because the act would be necessary?
Yeah, there's still sensual desire because the whole action of having sex, we call it making love, right? But really what we're doing is we're stimulating each other's senses in order to get a heightened mind, in order to get pleasant feelings in the mind. And the ultimate goal is to get to an orgasm, right? And that's the pleasant feelings in the mind. So even though we call it making love, and yes, it does bring two people closer together, it's really just stimulating each other's senses. And that's from the sensual desire that the mind has. So there's nothing wrong with sex. It's not bad or anything like this. It's just that if the mind is having conditioned experiences where it can only be happy if this particular thing is occurring, then it can't be permanently happy because it's looking for its pleasant feelings externally rather than being inwardly peaceful and joyful and happy. So as long as someone's having sex, they're still looking for satisfaction outside of themselves, and they're not inwardly happy and inwardly joyful because the mind's still looking for some kind of pleasant feelings externally. And that's what the sensual desire does. Whether it's food or clothing or jewelry or any of these other things, the mind can be longing, yearning for these things, and now it gets pleasant feelings based on them. That's part of the sensual desire. So sex is one of the few things that you can't do and do it without any pleasant feelings. So you could eat a piece of chocolate cake and not have pleasant feelings from it. You can enjoy it and learn how to enjoy it. And wow, that tastes really good, but you don't get any conditioned pleasant feelings from it. Sex is not that way. You're going to have conditioned feelings from it. So in order to get to that third and fourth stage of enlightenment, you would need to eliminate that. And that's where the mind's going to move into more peacefulness and more joy because it no longer is looking for satisfaction externally.
So I guess I'm just curious about the child component though. So so that's not possible primarily because, okay.
Yeah, it's not going to be.
I guess also based on what you're saying, you wouldn't potentially have the desire to have a child because in theory that would create attachments and all those things.
Right. If you're enlightened, you would have already had children prior to getting to enlightenment, or you would have chosen not to have children, and now you've gotten to enlightenment. So you're not going to get to enlightenment and then choose to have children. It's not. Because your mind is completely satisfied with the way your life currently is. Your mind's not longing, yearning for something else. Okay. All right, so now let's go to the next one, which is really straightforward. This one, the Buddha says, abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So it's exactly what he's saying here, that it's unwise to tell falsehoods. It's unwise to lie. Because when we lie, people don't see us as being dependable, trustworthy, and reliable, right? And now people will discover our lies. And in a professional environment, in a personal environment, when they discover our lies, it damages our relationships. And now it hinders our ability to move up in our career. For example, this is the unwholesome results of our unwise decisions. That if there is a boss that's going to staff a project and there's 10 different people to staff on the project, they're not going to staff the person who's lying and who's untrustworthy and who's unreliable. And now this is going to hinder your career. So you'd like to be trustworthy, dependable, reliable, somebody that is a truth speaker. And the Buddha explains this here so that you can then make the decision to do this if that's what you choose. And you'll see improved results in your relationships. Because when you're lying, if you've done a lot of lying, you know that your mind is obsessively trying to figure out what you said to one person versus another, and you're never going to be able to get to peace and joy that way, because there's a certain amount of craving here. When you're lying, there's something that the mind wants. It's expecting and longing, yearning for this thing, and it thinks that if I tell the truth, I'm not going to get it. So let me lie in order to get what I want. So the Buddha is teaching you how to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance from the mind. The Buddha understood this so well that he didn't even lie when he told a joke. Now, you might not associate a Buddha as someone who tells a joke, but I can assure you that a Buddha is a human being just like you and I. Enlightened beings are happy. They're having fun. They're joyful. You see these pictures of the Buddha, and he's looking all solemn and serious usually when he's in meditation, and that's the way people choose to depict him. You don't usually see pictures of the Buddha like laughing and joking and having a good old time, but that's what an enlightened being does. They have lots of fun. They're enjoying life. They're not walking around serious and so strict all the time. That's not what an enlightened being does. So an enlightened being will tell jokes. It's just that they tell truthful jokes. So if you're telling jokes where you're degrading and diminishing other people, or you're lying in your jokes, people are going to get used to that, and it's not wise to go around and degrade and diminish other people. So the Buddha told jokes. He just told truthful jokes. And truthful jokes actually take a lot more work and effort to develop, but oftentimes people laugh at those jokes a lot more than if you just degrade people, diminish people, or otherwise tell lies in your jokes. So you might need to do some shifts here in the way that you actually tell jokes, and look to tell jokes that are wise and that don't have lies in them. And that's going to produce the best results for you. Because if you can imagine this individual who referred to as the Buddha, if you can imagine him talking in a class like this and telling all this truth, sharing all this truth about the natural laws, but then on the side, he was lying. Right? On the side, he's telling jokes that are lies. People aren't going to know whether what he's teaching is actually truthful or not. So the Buddha used to speak the truth, whether he's teaching like this or he's talking on the side in a personal conversation. He was always telling the truth, because then people understood that he was a truth speaker, reliable and dependable. So you guys might decide to modify the way that you tell jokes, and the way that you talk is to speak the truth in all situations. Then your mind doesn't have to obsessively figure out what you said to one person versus another. You can just look inward and just tell the truth in all situations. So any questions on this one? No questions? Okay. So now the last one. This one, the Buddha says, refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So here, remember, whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, if there's any parts of his teachings that you don't understand and you need to investigate to understand, then investigate those, right? Don't just assume that you know what things mean. Like this word heedlessness, you might not know what that means. I didn't know what that means, and I'm a native English speaker, right? I grew up speaking English, and when I ran across this, I was like, I think I know what that means, but I'm not going to assume that I know what it means. Let me cultivate wisdom here so that I know what it means with 100% certainty. So I went and looked this word up, and this is what I came back with. It means careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, and unmindful. So if you're putting any kind of substance into the body that's promoting unmindfulness, you're actually walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment, because the Buddha taught you to cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind, because that's what's going to help you to be able to see what's going on in your own mind so that you can then purify it. If you're actually putting substances into the body that's causing heedlessness, you're not going to have attention and thoughtfulness, and you're not going to have clarity of mind to be able to make wise decisions. So this precept is very, very important, because if you don't practice this one, you're more likely to kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, or lie. If you go to a prison or you go to a jail and you ask people, like, why are you here? They might say, oh, I'm here for murder, or I'm here for robbing a bank. And you're like, no, like, really, like, why are you here? And they're like, oh, I'm here because of substances. Because if it wasn't for being high on those drugs, I would have never killed that person. Or if I didn't have a drug habit, I would have never robbed that bank. So about 80% of the people will tell you that they're actually there because of substances. That's what actually got them into prison. So if you don't practice this precept, you're more likely to kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, and to lie. So that's why it's really important that you pay attention to this one and practice this one closely, because it produces unmindfulness or unawareness if you aren't practicing this. So the Buddha, the way he teaches is he teaches timeless, that his words are timeless. They apply during his life and they apply long into the future. So the Buddha never gave us an exhaustive list of every single substance that produces heedlessness, because it would be impossible for him to do that. He would have never imagined that we would invent something called LSD or PCP or something like this, because these are chemical based. They didn't exist during his lifetime, right? So he didn't give you an exhaustive list. But if you understand this precept, you can actually apply it now and long into the future. So I've got a few things here that we'll talk through that aren't necessarily black and white, so you can see how to apply this precept. Okay, so let's take something like marijuana. We know with 100% certainty that marijuana has some medical benefits to it. There's been plenty of research. There's kids that have 20 seizures a day, and they put a little CBD oil on their tongue, and they don't have another seizure for 6 months. Right? So this is like undoubtable evidence that, yes, this plant has medical properties, but it can also be used for heedlessness. So you need to be able to know for yourself, what is your purpose if you're going to use this plant? And if you're looking for medical properties, usually people are looking for a high CBD, because there's two different sides to this plant. There's what's called CBD and THC. The CBD is the part of the plant that has medical benefits. And usually people that are looking for those medical benefits will look for a plant that has high CBD. And they're usually ingesting it through an oil or an edible. But then the people who are looking for a high, they're usually looking for a high THC. And they're typically smoking it. But you can also ingest it in other ways in order to be able to get high as well. So you need to be able to know for yourself, what is your purpose for using this plant. And if you're using this plant to eliminate stress or anxiety, this plant will never do that, because it's craving, desire, attachment that's producing that stress and anxiety. That plant will cover up your stress and anxiety for a period of time, but when you're not using that plant any longer, it will actually still have the stress and anxiety because you haven't eliminated your craving, desire, attachment. Then we know things like cigarettes don't have any medical benefits at all. So that's why more and more people are actually getting away from cigarettes. There was a lot of lung cancer, mouth cancers, throat cancers when this was really popular. So more and more people are figuring that out. You'd like to also pay attention to your prescriptions, right? When you get a medical prescription, some of these prescriptions can actually be very addicting. And we live in the information age where now if you're in the doctor's office and they give you a prescription, you can actually look on your phone and see what this prescription is. And if what you come back with is that this is very addictive, you're right there in the doctor's office. You can be like, hey, doctor, could you prescribe me a different medication? And they might actually be able to give you a different medication. But in some situations, they can't give you a different medication. And what you might find out is there is no other medication. This is the only one. Well, that wisdom to know that this medicine is addictive is actually really helpful for you, because now you know you'd like to hurry up and get off of it as soon as possible so that you don't get addicted to it. So you'd like to pay attention to your prescription medicines as well. And then even caffeine can be addicting. If you take in a lot of caffeine or even any caffeine, it is going to be addictive. It actually takes your mind up into this higher energy state, and then you actually drop off. So you'd like to be able to look at your caffeine and potentially get rid of that, because your mind's never going to be able to build sustainable energy all day long. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will have sustainable energy all day long. You won't have these peaks and then these drop-offs. You won't get exhausted and tired when you're enlightened. You'll have sustainable energy all day long, but you'll never be able to do that as long as you're relying on something like caffeine, because it's going to lift your mind up and then you're going to drop off. So you might need to even look at eliminating your caffeine intake. Then even sugar, we know that taken in excess will actually produce a high. And we usually learn that as a child. And by the time we get to adulthood, we don't usually ingest sugar as much. So you'd like to even pay attention to that. Again, for those of you guys here, I don't know if you guys can see this, underneath of this is psychedelics. That sometimes people tell you that psychedelics will actually help you to get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. What people think is that psychedelics are somehow going to help you to attain enlightenment, but it's not true. What psychedelics do is they do promote this introspection where you actually kind of look inward, and it kind of mimics some of the qualities that you need in order to be able to get to enlightenment, but your mind is never able to cultivate those qualities for yourself to be long term. You need to be introspective and you need to be reflective in order to be able to get to enlightenment. And that's what your mind's cultivating to be able to do, is be introspective and reflective. But if you're only relying on a substance like a psychedelic to be able to produce that, you're never developing that naturally. So you're going to need to be reflective and introspective at all times during your day. So you can't be in your boss's office and your boss is talking about something very challenging and very difficult, and you're like, hey boss, hold on a second, you're asking me to think here a lot, and I need to go drop this hit of LSD. I need to go take some magic mushrooms. I'm going to be right back. Just give me a moment, right? You're not going to be able to do that. Or you can't be talking to your mom and be like, hey mom, this conversation is getting really deep. I need to go take some magic mushrooms for a little bit. I'll be right back, right? You can't do that. You're going to need to be introspective at all times during your day. And if you rely on a psychedelic substance, it's not allowing your mind to cultivate that so that you can have that long term. So there's nothing about psychedelic substance that are actually helping you get to enlightenment. It's actually just the opposite. It's actually hindering you because your mind never gets the ability to cultivate that introspection so that you can have it at all times during your day. So any questions on this? By the way, I'm not providing you an exhaustive list here either. There's other things too, right? Like alcohol and synthetic drugs and all kinds of things that could go on this list. I'm just giving you a couple here to talk about so you can see how to apply this precept. You're going to need to look at your own life and see the substances that you're ingesting and try to figure out, is it producing heedlessness or not? And sometimes the mind has difficulties being objective because it really wants to hold on to this thing. So you need to be able to look at things objectively. So any questions here on this one? No questions? Okay. So right now it's just 5 minutes after 2. I'm sorry, 12. It's 5 minutes after 12. So we're going to break for lunch here. We're going to break for about an hour and a half and come back, and then I'm going to teach you guys walking meditation. I usually actually get back at 2 o'clock because normally this talk takes up to 12:30, but you guys didn't really have too many questions, so we were able to move through it. So I usually get back at 2 o'clock, and then we finish up by 3, but we can actually start at 1:30, and then we'll probably be finished by 2:30 today. Okay, so enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you guys at 1:30. Okay, all right, thank you. All right.